What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. Today we got Elvis Costello's debut, My Aim Is True, as our exclusive Patreon album of the month, this time for October of 2024. Eventually this will be on YouTube, but if you guys would like to support us in any way like our great patrons do, check out the Patreon link below, the Patreon link on the end screen. I don't just say it to hear myself talk on every video. We could not do this channel without the patrons. I put a ton of hours every month, and it's a labor of love, but they also give us diverse programming on this channel. So I've went through and tried to pick classic albums that we have not done on the channel. It's a little bit of a task, right? If you haven't been with us before, there's over 3,000 videos up, and there's a lot of the best albums of all time, but there's still a lot left. So we're going to tackle this one. I've heard this album a couple times ever. I mean, I'm in the U.S. Elvis was never big in the U.S. Had a couple of videos that I remember on MTV in the early 80s, but I actually like the follow-up to this album even a little bit better, but we'll see if I still feel that way. Debut studio album originally released in the UK in July of '77 through Stiff Records, produced by Stiff artist and musician Nick Lowe. The album was recorded from late '76 to early '77 over 6 4-hour studio sessions at Pathway Studios in London. So think about that. 6 4-hour studio sessions. They had to have it done because studio time is so expensive. And back then it was so hard to get. The backing band was the California-based country rock act Clover, who were uncredited on the original release due to contractual difficulties. At the time, performing as D.P. Costello, Costello changed his name to Elvis after Elvis Presley at the suggestion of the label and adjusted his image to match the rising punk rock movement. So of course, the very next year we'll have this year's motto, and then the Attractions are with him. So he'll be dubbed as Elvis Costello and the Attractions. So if you're actually looking for that stuff on Spotify, you have to search it that way. This is under Elvis Costello, but this year's motto is not under Elvis Costello. Just a little FYI if you go on a little hunt after this video. Went to 25 in Australia, 24 in Canada, 14 in the UK, and went to 32 on the US Billboard Top LPs and Tape chart. It is influenced by a wide variety of genres, from punk, new wave, and British pub rock to elements of 1950s rock and roll, R&B, and rockabilly. The more downbeat lyrics are motivated by revenge and guilt, reflecting topics from relationship struggles to politically charged situations and misogynist characters. The original monochrome cover art showing Costello in a pigeon-toed stance was later colorized for reissues. Now, the album was preceded by 3 singles, all of which failed to chart. By June of '77, Elvis formed a new permanent backing band, The Attractions, as I mentioned earlier, to better match his new image and commence live performances with them for the rest of the year. On release, the album was met with critical acclaim, as Elvis was through most of his career. Many were praising his musicianship and songwriting. Appeared on several year-end lists. In later decades, commentators considered it one of Costello's finest works, one of the best debut albums in music history, and has appeared on numerous best-of lists. Pitchfork gave it a 9.8 out of 10, coming out hot out of the gate for Elvis. British DJ Charlie Gillett played songs from one tape containing future My Aim Is True songs, Blame It on Kane, and Mystery Dance on his show throughout the summer of 1976. So I'll pause for a minute and say, if you're younger, like, you don't really understand the power that DJs had. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable when you study music history. And just when I was growing up, we were all listening basically to one hit radio station. There might have been several in your city, but most of us were listening to that one hot station. And so those DJs had great power, man. We didn't have streaming. We didn't have a lot of money that we could go buy the vinyl albums or the cassettes later on. So like, we're all listening. So they had great power, man. They kind of spun the music that would stick in our heads. The exposure garnered interest from labels, although it was rejected by Island Records, Virgin Records, and American-based CBS Records. He was eventually signed to London-based, as I mentioned earlier, Stiff Records in August of '76 by label co-founders Jake Riviera and Dave Robinson. He was the first artist signed to Stiff, but this was the label's 11th release, so I guess it took a bit. They financed recording sessions for an album at Pathway, like I talked about, an 8-track studio with the American rock country band Clover's the backing band. The band, the guitarist John McPhee, the bassist John Cibiandi, the keyboardist Sean Hopper, and the drummer Mickey Shine had moved to Britain after gaining a cult following there and signed to Phonogram Records. They were not credited on the final album at the time due to contractual difficulties, and I just kind of told you what that would have been. This article doesn't even tell me what it is that I pulled this from, but they were signed to Phonogram Records. So when an artist appeared on someone else's album and they were from different labels. They just didn't give him credit. This went on all the time. So I told you about the 6 4-hour sessions. They were recorded for a grand total of about 2,000 pounds. He kept his day job. I love this. Elvis kept his day job because he had to, right? As a data entry clerk at Elizabeth Arden during the sessions. He would call in sick, travel to rehearse his songs with Clover, and then head back to the studio the next day to record. He recalled disliking the time at Headley Grange and that he and Clover, that's where they had done the rehearsals, and he and Clover had musical disagreements, but nevertheless praised their musicianship. Probably why they didn't stick around with him, right? Most of the tracks were recorded live and in first takes with little overdubbing. While Clover provided most of the instrumentation, Stan Shaw, the hitman, played keyboards on Less Than Zero, while Lowe himself produced and sang backing vocals. The majority of the songs on the album were written in about 2 weeks. It's a quick album here, right? Quick album. 6 sessions, 2 weeks to write it. Most of them came from Elvis's earlier demo tapes and live performances with his former band, Flip City. The Village Voice, which was a highly influential and well thought of publication, their annual Paz and Jop critics poll of the year's best albums, this finished at number 2 behind the Sex Pistols' Nevermind the Bollocks, which ironically enough was the first Patreon exclusive album that I did, and this is the second. This was inducted in the Grammy Hall of Fame, and all songs, of course, are written by Elvis. So if you've never done this before, the music won't be in the video, but it will be at the Vimeo link below. Patrons, you know this, but this is eventually going to be up on YouTube. Let's start this thing out with the first track, Welcome to the Working Week. It's a comment on the working life aimed at a more privileged woman. Features a brief runtime and unpolished production. As you see, well, this song was only 1:23. I mean, I kind of know this song. I was shocked. I didn't ever realize it was 1:23. Releases a B-side to Allison, which we'll get to in a little while. It has since attracted critical acclaim from music writers. According to Elvis himself, this song was one of several songs for the album. It was written in that span of 2 or 3 weeks, like I talked about in the summer of '77. In a 1994 interview, Elvis noted the song as a more bitter take on life in London than his 1994 song, London's Brilliant Parade, commenting, quote, London's Brilliant Parade is a little bit more ambivalent in its feelings towards London than, say, Welcome to the Working Week, which is very unforgiving. Maybe as you get older, you see the two sides of it. Yeah, you mellow out a little bit, boys and girls, when you get older. All right, man, I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, patrons. All right, as I go through the lyrics, as you boys and girls know I do, on these songs as they're playing, this is why I didn't realize this song was 1:23. Usually you see 1:23, it's a fragment of a song or a quick little chorus. This song goes verse, chorus, bridge, verse, outro. This is a complete song in 1:23, and it feels like a complete song. Just fantastic. Like this is just fired out of a cannon, man. The pace of it, but you don't feel like it's rushed. I still can't believe it's 1:20. This song should have been, let's go 4 minutes, Elvis. I mean, you guys know I like shorter songs, but I mean, yeah, fantastic way. First thing that we ever hear from Elvis Costello is this song. I think it's always important what the first track on a debut album is, and it couldn't have been better. And as well thought of as this album is, there's just not a lot out there on it. We got Miracle Man next. It was featured in the film The Godfather 3 in a scene where Vincent and Mary Corleone are getting hot and heavy. It's a PG-13 explanation. I don't think words that I've ever uttered in my life, but the description of the song said that. Let's go. Miracle Man. Great song. Fantastic musicianship. Fantastic songwriter. He packs a ton of lyrics in a 3.5-minute song. The real story of it you can get in the chorus. Why do you have to say, and his emotion, like he's got great energy throughout, but he even pumps it up in this, right? Why do you have to say that there's always someone who can do it better than I can? But don't you think that I know that walking on the water won't make me a miracle man? In other words, no matter what I do, you're never satisfied and it's never good enough for you. And if you've ever been in one of those relationships, and I have, not much more frustrating than that. Get out. All right. We go to our third track, No Dancing. It's crazy. This song's 2:46. These songs seem so much longer, like in a good way, because he packs so much storytelling in here. No Dancing. It's not going well. Right? It's just not going well. So there's going to be no dance when they get home. She made a fool of him. And they've kind of grown apart. Great energy again. More of a 50s style song, a late 50s style song, especially the first third of it, but Really well done. Blame It on Cain is our fourth track. Elvis stated he was attempting to merge, quote, a Mercy Beat bridge into He's a Rebel by Gene Pitney. I don't know that song, but some of you may. Blame It on Cain. I'm sure this is Cain of the Bible. So Elvis is blaming it on Cain. Of course, Cain enabled Cain, the first murderer ever in the world, if you believe the Bible. I happen to. And of course, blame it on Cain. Don't blame it on me. Oh, it's nobody's fault. But we need somebody to burn, right? We always got to hold somebody responsible no matter what. And he kind of goes through these different things. I like the first verse right away. Once upon a time, I had a little money. Government burglars took it long before I could mail it to you. And at one point, these artists were being taxed 98% in the UK. Hence why people like the Rolling Stones and Cat Stevens and Rod Stewart left, right? That's insanity, man. I think we're taxed bad in the US. That's insanity. So little shot there, and another really good song. Next up, we got the best known song from this album. One of Elvis's best known songs, period. We got Allison. He claimed the song was written as an ode to a woman he saw working at a supermarket, though he's remained vague on the meaning. His single never charted. It's become one of his most famous songs, and Linda Ronstadt actually covered the song in 1979 and had a modern hit with it. He said that, another thing he said about the song, he said, quote, it's about disappointing somebody and to deny suggestions that the line, somebody better put out the big light, my aim is true, refer to murder. So he was trying to deny those by just saying it's about disappointing somebody. I mean, they also say that the word dancing in here is a substitution for sex on this album. So the third track, no dancing when they get home, you can kind of implement that in there. He's never said that's true, though. The line, my aim is true, is in this song, given the album's title. He's also said the musical idea for the chorus breaking up the line, I know this world is killing you, in a staccato fashion derives from the manner that the line, life ain't so easy when you're a, quote, it precedes the title refrain on Ghetto Child by the Detroit Spinners. So that was an inspiration for him. So a little more on what he talked about in his 2015 autobiography, Unfaithful Music and Disappearing Ink. He said, I've always told people that I wrote the song Allison after seeing a beautiful checkout girl at the local supermarket. She had a face for which a ship might have once been named. It's a really good line. Scoundrels once have fought mist-swathed duels to defend her honor. Now she was punching in the prices on cans of beans at a cash register and looking as if all hopes and dreams of her youth were draining away. All that were left would soon be squandered to a ruffian who told her convenient lies and trapped her still further. It releases a single in the UK with the B-side of Welcome to the Working Week, and as two singles in the US, one with a mono version of the same song on the B-side, the other with Miracle Man. The US and Canadian single versions of Allison are unique in that it is remixed to add a string section. But we're listening to the original here as we do. So Elvis had also said, whenever he was asked, who the song was about, he said, the less said, the better. Much could be undone if it is shared. So, some cryptic stuff. I see how people, if you looked at it the right way. So he's infatuated with this girl and she hooks up with a friend of his and then she ends up married in the second verse. But, the chorus, Allison, I know this world is killing you. Oh, Allison, my aim is true. And then the second verse, he's talking about her husband, or getting married. And sometimes at the end of it, sometimes I wish that I could stop you from talking when I hear the silly things that you say. I think somebody better put out the big light because I can't stand to see you this way. So I think that's why some people think he wants to murder her. I think he's probably talking about himself, like the affection he has for her. It just needs to be put out, he needs to get over it. But I don't know. So it's a really interesting song, and it should have been a much bigger hit in the US than it was. We're going to finish out side one with Sneaky Feelings. The booming, energetic way that Elvis sings is just, it's fantastic. And this song is only 2 minutes and 11 seconds. So here we go again. I mean, he's writing full songs and just pounding them into these tight arrangements and tight musicianships. And it doesn't feel like he's speeding through the song. It's such a gift. All right, that's side one. Let's get to side two. The song that ended up being the third single did not chart, even though it had greater exposure than the first two. We got Red Shoes, but in parentheses before the start, the Angels want to wear my red shoes. Written by Elvis on a train traveling from London to Liverpool in 1976, he reportedly sketched out the song in the final 10 minutes of the trip. He later described this sudden inspiration as, quote, startling. He said, quote, I wrote it in 10 minutes on a train out of Liverpool, the whole song in one gulp. And then there was this whole comedic thing of getting it down. Nowadays, you can demo things on your phone. I had to block it out in my mind. Then I had to get off the train, get to my mother's house, grab an old guitar I had there, and play the song until I imprinted it in my memory. I had no tape recorder. I had no way other than repetition to drill it in my head so I wouldn't lose it. I mean, that is just fantastic, right? An ability you had to have in yesteryear that obviously with technology, you don't have to have now. The opening of the song was created by Clover guitarist John McPhee. Bass player John Symbiote, also of Clover, reportedly called the song, quote, that one that sounds like the Birds. Another diverse song. I mean, it starts off with the chorus, which is what he hasn't done yet. He changes the chorus a little bit in the second one where he gets a little call and response, and the second time the chorus appears. But, really good song. I can't believe these songs weren't highly successful on initial release in the UK. Speaking of single releases, we got Less Than Zero, his debut single. So here's what it's about. It expressed his anger after seeing former British Union of Fascists leader Oswald Mosley interviewed on television, attempting to deny his racist past. In the liner notes to the Rhino edition of the album, Elvis writes, Less Than Zero was a song I'd written after seeing the despicable Oswald Mosley being interviewed on BBC television. The former leader of the British Union of Fascists seemed unrepentant about his poisonous actions of the 1930s. It was more of a slandering fantasy than a reasoned argument. End quote. On his first visit to the U.S., Costello found that American audiences did not understand the song. Writing in his 2015 autobiography, Unfaithful Music and Disappearing Ink, quote, I'm not sure if anyone in Cleveland had ever heard of Oswald Mosley or gave a damn about him when we played Less Than Zero that night. I mean, I've never heard of this guy. It was just some rock and roll music with a fashionable sounding title, end quote. Later, he substantially rewrote the lyrics to refer to Lee Harvey Oswald. This was a reference to the common misconception among American fans that this was the Mr. Oswald referred to in the original lyrics. Just like an arrogant American to think of that, right? This version is usually referred to as the Dallas version, where I live, and it is available as a bonus track on the My Aim Is True reissue, and a live version can be found on Live at the El Mocambo. Now, speaking of live, there's a very famous Saturday Night Live incident involving Elvis, and this song's tied to it. It happened on December 17, 1977. Following pressure from his record company to play this song on the show, he began to play the song, but he stopped after only a few bars, saying that, quote, there's no reason to do this song here. He then launched into an unannounced performance of Radio Radio, a song he had promised not to play. As a result, he was banned from SNL until 1989, so for 12 years. In 2015, he wrote of having seen his appearance on Saturday Night Live as an opportunity equivalent to the Beatles' first live U.S. television performance on The Ed Sullivan Show. He said, quote, Columbia insisted that the second song should be Less Than Zero. The song had already proven to be obscure to many American ears, like we just talked about, right? And if this was supposed to be our I Want to Hold Your Hand moment, I thought the song was too low key. He had then come up with a plan to switch songs, inspired by a live performance on the BBC's The Lulu Show in 1969, in which Jimi Hendrix had scrapped a performance of Hey Joe after a few bars to instead play an impromptu tribute to Cream, who had broken up just days before, even though the song's about a horrible part that, hey, red. I mean, if you just listen to the lyrics, Americans, calling Mr. Oswald with a swastika tattoo, I mean, that's the very first verse. So turn up the TV, no one listening will suspect, even your mother won't detect it, so your father won't know, they think that I've got no respect, but everything means less than zero. That is the chorus, basically saying how influential TV was. Now it's not TV, it's the web and everything else, but a good song, but an interesting choice for the debut single. Right? I think it's catchy. If you don't listen to the lyrics, I get it, but if anybody listened to the lyrics, they'd be like, huh. I mean, it's a very heavy lyrical song, heavy content, right? Heavy subject matter to have as your debut single, but no one ever accused record companies of being geniuses, right? And so we got a 1.5-minute song, Mystery Dance. All right, Mystery Dance. Look, I don't think this is a standout on the album or anything, but it's another example of this brilliant musicianship. This is a 1.5-minute song. It's a 1.5 minutes long, and he gets in verse, chorus, a small guitar solo, verse, chorus, outro. In a 1.5 minutes, doesn't feel rushed, has definitely a 50s sound to it. Almost has a 50s Buddy Holly sound to it, who I think Elvis very much favors on the cover of this album. And I have a brilliant top 10 up of Buddy Holly that one of our other patrons, Richard, brought us a few months ago that you should go check out after this. That's neither here nor there, but hey, I can always connect many videos to the videos that I'm shooting, but really well done. And of course, dance. As it was in our third track, No Dancing, dance here is definitely a placeholder for sex. This is about virgin sex. We'll make it a little PG-13. There's no way not to. That's what this song's about. Next up, a 2.5-minute song, Pay It Back. Such a catchy chorus. And once again, fantastically written. Musicianship is tight. This album does not have a bad track left. We've still got 2 songs left, but I'm also going to give you a bonus track, so we'll get to that in a minute. Next up, we have I'm Not Angry. I'm Not Angry. I mean, we're 11 songs in this album, and Elvis is still doing different stuff. The guitar work on here is much harder. It's almost like a hard rock song. You can hear the spite in Elvis's voice because he's talking about the start with this girl that he cares about. He has to listen to her hooking up with another guy, like upstairs or in another room. But he's not angry. But even before he gets to I'm Not Angry, while he's singing that first part about her being up there, you hear the angry. So very intelligently done. Very cool with the whole angry. I mean, really well done. So we got 1 song left on the proper original release, but I'm going to give you another song after that. We got Waiting for the End of the World. He wrote in his 2015 autobiography, Waiting for the End of the World turned a simple homeward journey on the underground into a claustrophobic travelogue, pulling the hysteria out of newspaper headlines into everyday boredom of the commuter. I mean, even sometimes Elvis's quotes are at a high level, right? Waiting for the End of the World. Great guitar work on that. A good way to finish out the album. One of the weaker tracks on the album, but that's not a slight to it at all. So the proper review or reaction is done. But Elvis released a song as a single after this album came out. Remember the 3 singles on here, none of them charted anywhere. Called, I'll bring it up here. Watching the Detectives. So this was his first hit single. Went to 15 in the UK and charted in Canada, Australia, some other places. Went to 108 in the US. It didn't quite get in the Hot 100. But what happened was in the US, by the time this album made it to the US, Columbia, who was his record label in the US, went ahead and added this on to the end of this album at number 13. And I mean, it wasn't on a UK album, but it came between My Aim Is True and this year's Model. So I'm going to go ahead and include it on this reaction just because it was included on the US version. And I mean, it was his first hit single. So let's do it. All right. Watching the Detectives. Also quite different, right? Reggae beat on here. The Attractions are with him on this one. The musicianship is fantastic. And, he can't be heard because he has no heart. Well done. I don't think it's a better song than a lot of the songs on this album. I think it's a better way to end the album, as was added on the US. It's a better song than Waiting for the End of the World. To me, it's a better song. Although, if you've watched many of our reviews, especially the Beatles reviews, when their stuff was changed up, and I mean, this is to the Stones too, but their stuff's changed up in the US. I'm never a fan of that. Keep it how the artist had it. But I see what Columbia was just trying to take a song. I mean, it wasn't a hit song in the US, but it did almost get on the Hot 100, so at least got some sort of play, trying to get Elvis over in the US. And this song's also been covered by Toto, shout out to JSB, and Duran Duran, among others. So it's well thought of among artists. Now remember, this song can't appear on my favorites. I'm not taking it into consideration for the album's overall score, but let's get to those favorites. And those favorite tracks are going to be, I have 3 honorable mentions. They're all from side 2, and I have 3 favorites from side 1. It's kind of funny how that worked out. So honorable mentions, Red Shoes, or The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes, Less Than Zero, and I'm Not Angry. Favorites, I mean, you probably figured it out when you heard me react to the first song. Welcome to the Working Week, Miracle Man, and Allison. Not too difficult there. Now we're going to get to my overall score. It's going to be sky high. I like this album more than I remember. I listened to this album when Trey and I were doing the album drafts. If you haven't listened to those yet or watched those, we do our top 10 albums from every single year. So when we were on this year, when we're on 77, I listened to this album. But, I was listening to 30 to 40 albums a week from each of those years. So it kind of just blended in, and I liked it. But this album's fantastic. And if you guys watch this channel a lot, you're all patrons, you know this. I don't grade easily. But this one's going to be a 9.0, sky high. This album's fantastic, man. Love it. So thank you to all the patrons who voted. If you're watching this later on YouTube, the way it works, I put up a video every month and then I put up a poll, nominate 3 albums. This one barely won. We almost had a three-way tie for the month of October. This won by one vote, but fantastic choice by the patrons. Thank you to you, patrons. Thank you to everybody who's watched this video. And until next time, guys, I will see you.